Ooh, gets me every time. I'll be in here jamming.
I love it.
How are you?
I am good. How are you doing?
I'm good. I had some boiled peanuts just before we went live. That was like my lunch, which tisk tisk. And I think I'm getting old, man, because the way these boiled peanuts be having my like blood sugar feeling crazy.
Yes.
But it's a classic Southern
Yes.
delicacy.
The peanuts. The boiled peanuts are so good. So
Yes,
good.
especially
Don't,
the Cajun. The
don't tell me
Cajun.
that, we have to limit them now.
Yes, just maybe need to decrease the sodium level just a little bit.
That's good.
Like, yeah, because I can't give them up. I have a unhealthy addiction. Oh, yes, it's good to see you, and it's good to see everybody coming on. Come on
Come on
in.
in, y'all. Come on in. We see the numbers going up. That's what we like. Come
Yes,
on
it's good.
in.
It's Monday.
It's Monday. It's Monday,
Yeah,
y'all. We're back again.
towards the end of the Monday. So whatever, hard little hump you had to do to start your week, it's all right. It's all right.
It's
You
all
got
right.
through. You got through
You
most
made
of
it.
it. You got through
You
most of
made
it.
it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now you get to your favorite part, which is tuning in live and listening to us.
Right here.
Come on in. Come on in. Let's get started. Get settled. Put your feet up. If you're, you got a couple different ways you can tune into us now. We'll talk about that in just a second. But as you are getting comfortable, getting adjusted, make sure you go ahead and like and subscribe and share and drop a couple names in the comments, like tag a couple people, like, hey, this is going on, you know. So
Check it out. Come check us out.
join us. All right. It's looking good. I'm happy to see everybody. All right. So for those who don't know, my name is Akile Anai, and I'm the Director of Media and Communications for the African People's Socialist Party. And you're now tuned into the hottest new podcast to hit your timeline, I promise, One Africa Worldview.
And I'm your co-host, Dr. Mariah, Promotions Director for Black Power 96.3 FM Radio, where One Africa Worldview now is airing. Also, important announcement, starting next week, our shows are moving to Mondays at 3 p.m. Eastern, y'all. That's 3 p.m. Eastern. Same day, different time, and we'll be right here. That's every Monday still, but changing to that 3 p.m. Eastern. So make sure you're subscribed so you can get that notification when we go live.
Yes. And as mentioned, this is the One Africa Worldview podcast, bringing you critical news and analysis from the African internationalist perspective. So, what is African internationalism? I know for many of you who follow the Burning Spirit TV YouTube channel, you've probably seen, heard, and you know what African internationalists and African internationalism is, and you might be an African internationalist. But for those who are not familiar, African internationalism is a theory that was developed by Chairman Omali Yeshitela to sum up and define the conditions of our dispersed African nation and establish the trajectory toward our liberation. The theory centers colonialism as the primary contradiction that not only we as Black people face, no matter where we are, but one that the entire world is grappling with and suffering from. Chairman Omali has defined this global parasitic political and economic relationship as a colonial mode of production, establishing the starting point of capitalism with the colonial assault on Africa, Asia, the so-called Americas, and elsewhere. And more about this theory and worldview can be understood by reading the Burning Spear newspaper.
Yeah, so we'll kick off our program with our Whirlwind Weekly update, giving you our African internationalist analysis on the day's top headlines. Everything that's going on, y'all, and we'll give you our point here. And then we'll shift to our primary objective, which will be recognizing Marcus Garvey, leader of the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League. And we aren't just raising him up as the profound leader that he was, y'all, but showing his work was reassumed by Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the African People's Socialist Party. So finally, for our For the Culture segment today, we'll be interviewing Kendra Bulluck-Major, Executive Director for the upcoming Orange Blossom Classic in Miami Gardens, Florida. So we'll be speaking with her about the significance of this event in raising up HBCUs, y'all.
Wow. So We already laid it out. We got a jam-packed episode for you today. So let's go ahead and dive right in to this Whirlwind Weekly recap. And up first, Comrade Maya, you got the scoop on some developments and how redistricting is being used to undermine the Black vote inside the U.S. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. When it comes to this latest attack on the African political power, it just didn't come out of nowhere, y'all. It has been going on forever. And this time it's happening starting over in Texas, where we see this aggressive gerrymandering tactics that lay the groundwork for what we see going on everywhere here. And that's happening nationwide. So in Texas, this colonial state is an action to actually redraw district lines to pack the Black and brown voters into as few districts as possible, stripping communities of their ability to influence elections. And that's what they're doing, y'all. It's a long-standing strategy used by both Republican and Democratic parties. And they just use this to manipulate the map so African people can't build or exercise collective political power. So when it comes to that, that's not a flaw in the system. It is the system. It's the system doing exactly what it was built to do, y'all. So let's be clear. This latest wave of redistricting happening across the U.S. is nothing new. It's a colonial democracy. And that's not just about fairness. It's certainly not about protecting the so-called integrity of the elections, as they say. What we're seeing is colonialism in action, y'all. Just the strategic, calculated moves by the colonial ruling class to undermine and erase the political power of African people. It happens over and over again, and we're seeing it in action. They're not just redrawing these lines or anything like that, redrawing all these maps with squiggly lines. They're redrawing the lines of our oppression. So when it comes to that, in state after state, Black communities are being carved up, split across all these districts, and packed into these voting blocks that are designed to silence us. That's all they're designed to do. And while all this is happening, California Governor Gavin Newsom is out here making headlines, going head-to-head with Trump, positioning himself as this moral savior of the Democratic Party. And when it comes to that, don't be fooled. Newsom and Trump are just two wings of the same colonial bird. And when it comes to that, one to sell you these dreams that happens over and over, and then the other's over here selling you threats. So both of these just happen to keep African people trapped in this system that was never built to include us, y'all. So just this redistricting, it's just not this big new political tactic. It's a weapon. And it's a weapon of this colonial warfare. And it's how the ruling class ensures that African communities remain voiceless. And while they continue to just really extract our labor, rob our communities of all the resources that we see over and over, and enforce these policies that harm us generation after generation. So we cannot vote our way to liberation or anything like that inside a system that was built on our backs, y'all. And what we need is the organization, unity, and power of what outside of this colonial structure. And the African working class must build our own political and economic institutions, y'all, just like the African People's Socialist Party is doing. And that serves our interests, not those of this ruling class, no matter how progressive they may sound and just things they promise us, y'all. And while they redraw all these lines and these maps with these new squiggly lines to silence our vote, let's not forget, when that still doesn't work, the colonial state turns to force. And speaking of force, Director Akile, can you tell us what's happening over there in D.C.?
Ooh, Carmen Mariah, you just threw down the gauntlet here. Really, really appreciate this segue into this next headline because it's all, all of this is happening at the same time, and none of it's like isolated. It's all a part of the same assault on African people inside the US. And that is that this past week, Donald Trump executed his plan of unleashing the National Guard in Washington, D.C., to use his own words, fight, quote, violent gangs and bloodthirsty criminals. Well, I think they're, raiding the wrong houses. They need to go raid the White House. But Anyway, ever since this announcement and the unleashing of federal troops on the streets of DC, we have seen videos of people getting brutalized and snatched off the street by police in bulletproof vests and unmarked vehicles with masks and caps on to hide their identity. These violent arrests have been taking place in public areas, and bystanders always record and ask the police who they are, why they don't have identification, where they're taking the people arrested, but to no avail. And here's one clip from the Washington Post of a food delivery driver who was apprehended and thrown to the ground as he was leaving a coffee shop on Saturday morning.
You all right, dude? No. Hey, pull Chris off. Pull Chris off. Stop! Get our city. Get out of our city. Choke yourself out. Right here. Turn it.
What agency are you guys with?
Who are you guys? Oh, are you guys the cops? Shut the up. Who are you? Who are you? Man, take your mask off and show me some badge.
What agency are you guys with?
It's so easy to be behind a mask. Can you guys tell us who you are? Who are you? Oh, you guys are ruining this country. You know that, right? Liberals already ruined it.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Can we see some badge work, guys?
His property.
Hey, guys, already ruined it. No number, no ID, no name.
Oh, yeah. So, so this is just one of many instances, right? The DC police have also been conducting random stops and targeting drivers for seatbelt and tailgate infractions. On Wednesday, August 14th, protesters gathered on 14th Street, warning drivers to avoid certain areas, as well as chanting, "Get off our streets and go home, fascists." In addition to random arrests, however, is that DC police have also been clearing out homeless encampments, an action some on social media have been voicing support for, despite the fact that this is a complete distraction from the fact that rampant homelessness has been a necessary part of this colonial capitalist system that will always need an underclass of people to exploit, most of which are African and colonized people. Not to mention, clearing out these encampments is to also deter from the fact that DC suffers from one of the worst examples of gentrification in this country, as well as the complete neglect of neighborhoods in the Southeast and Acosta areas where African people are mostly located. Just like we talked about St. Louis and African people being displaced from their communities with complete neglect from the city, we talked about that in last week's episode. We see the same happening in DC. In 1970, the African population in what was then known as Chocolate City was over 71%. But according to the last census, that number has plummeted to about 43%, less than half of the population. The deployment of the National Guard into DC, as well as we all know, isn't to stop crime. It's for the colonizer to intensify its repression against African and colonized workers. And that reality is clear as day. They always, give some justification for it, but they don't even need to give a justification for it nowadays. They're just like, this is naked colonialism and we're not going to hide it. It's not hidden behind some liberal or left-wing colonizer. And it's not a colonialism that's masked as progressive. As you were talking about, Comrade Mariah, how the Democratic Party tries to distinguish itself, and it's, hurling out words like fascists and stuff like that. And autocracy and things like that out to the Republican Party. But as you said, it's two wings to the same colonial bird, and it's a colonialism now that it's not able to hide behind these things. And the African petty bourgeoisie and those in the Democratic Party right now are crying foul, and they're only doing that because the impact that this has on their political influence in the contest for control of the colonial state. So we know historically that it's been under the Democratic and Republican regimes where the National Guard and other forms of the U.S. military have been deployed into the African community to control or prevent any uprising. And with the fragility of the colonial capitalist world economy, because it's super fragile, it's, real shaky, y'all. The colonizer no longer finds itself needing to hide behind anyone or anything to make their struggle against us. So like I said, it's naked. is butt ass. It's just right in your face. In the last couple of decades, the colonizer has deployed the strategy of white power and blackface, or neo-colonialism, indirect rule, as it's sometimes referred. And it looks like, the Barack Hussein Obamas of the world, the Ramaphosa's of the world, and the like, that get installed by US colonial powers to keep African people quiet while they carry out the bidding of white power. And we have some updates from the African continent regarding the issues of neocolonialism. And Kamar Mariah, you can tell us more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. In Occupied Azania, which is commonly known as South Africa, the question of neocolonialism and settler colonialism, it continues to oppress the African working class, y'all. And the politicians in South Africa, neocolonial stooges who represent the colonizers' interests, they say that African workers are the central cause of all the problems being experienced in South Africa. And they actually claim that African workers in South Africa are unemployed because of foreigners. And, also other Africans crossing the illegitimate borders is what they're talking about, taking the jobs, and that crime has been just increasing because Black people are the criminals, according to them. And by the foreigners, they are referring only to African people, not anyone else. And sometimes the Pakistanians, never the white people who occupy that land. And it's always, like we said, the African. And the suggestion is that if we get rid of these Africans and get rid of our own people here and remain with our colonizers, everything will be repaired and we'll be finally make that whole rainbow nation work. So what we really understand, though, and see here is that the reality is that South Africa is not a nation. Rather, it is another settler colony built on the backs, sweat, and blood of the indigenous African majority, y'all. And the construction of South Africa coincided with the creation of the rest of the countries on our continent, all of which are illegitimate at this point. And lest we forget, all this crackdown on immigration we're seeing here from the US and South Africa is a crackdown on colonized people's freedom to move and access land that is rightfully theirs. So in South Africa, it is on record that white people own 72% of the agricultural land. And this excludes the large suburbs and industrial companies that occupy large tracts of our Africa. And none of these, without any exception, are for repairing the colonial damage done to our people and our land. All of this is owned by people that are not African. So these white people have taken the stance of white-only towns, even after having already taken up so much land and blood from our continent. So the question of land ownership is ultimately always that question of power. Who has the land has the power. So just despite all these privileged positions that Afrikaners, these are the white settlers, have at the expense of African workers. Not even a few months ago, Trump granted refuge to them to come to the US, told them to come on over. And as if it's not their very parasitic presence that continues to impoverish African people in occupied Azania, as we mentioned. And this granting of this refuge was also done at the same time all of these ICE raids were going, snatching up our Mexican and indigenous people off the streets of LA. So this is just a war on Mexican indigenous people that is still raging, despite the fact that legacy media is no longer really talks about it. And they'll make you think that, oh, this is not happening. And just because we're not talking about it does not mean that's not still occurring. So here's Comrade Tafari, Director of Organization for African Socialist International in Occupied Azania, summing up how African people in the continent must organize against this colonialism as one African people. Let's check that out.
What we are concerned about is, how do we free ourselves as Africans? How do we free ourselves as Black people in this continent? Do we free ourselves by calling other African people foreigners and seeing them as the contradiction in terms of the healthcare issue in South Africa? Or do we organize and unite ourselves as Africans against colonialism, against the social system, against the oppressors, the colonizers, the white men in South Africa? Get our land back, get the economy back, unite the African economy with the help and the involvement of the Africans that are here. Because when you begin to antagonize Africans from Zimbabwe, then you have less numbers now. And then you're fighting on two fronts. You want to fight an African and fight a colonizer at the same time. How are you going to win that battle? And how long is it going to take? How long is it going to take this struggle against so-called foreigners? Because the foreigner is the black man, apparently. And the white man is the citizen, right? So how long is it going to take? 10 years, 20 years, 100 years, whatever. Then, because you're saying that this is the issue at hand, right? You deal with this issue, how long is it going to take? And then are you going to fight the colonizers thereafter? You want to start with the African and then you're going to fight the colonizers after. We're saying no to that. The borders are going.
Wow. I mean, the contradiction is so glaring, and really appreciate those words from Director Tafari, especially in light of the fact that we did an episode about this thing called American Descendants of Slaves. And it's similar here, right? It's like we're going to fight other Africans, who are here to get back their resources that, the colonizer has stolen and concentrated inside the U.S. So we're going to fight ourselves rather than fight the colonizer right at home, right? So
yeah, it's that division. Yeah, we're seeing it everywhere. Wow.
Yep. So Director Jafari made the call. We have to unite the African nation, and that's what we unite with. So Uhuru. And back in the U.S., the Trump administration and the Department of Justice has announced a $50 million bounty on the democratically elected president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro. The bounty isn't new. In fact, in 2020, Trump put $15 million, and in January, Democrat Biden raised it to $25 million. And now Trump has raised it all the way up to $50 million. The Department of Justice declared the reward, quote, for information leading to the arrest and or conviction, unquote, of Maduro, and naming him as a, quote, leader of the specially designated global terrorist Cartel de los Soles. The charges are listed as narco-terrorism, conspiracy, cocaine importation conspiracy, conspiracy to use and carry machine guns, and destructive devices in furtherance of a drug crime. I thought we already made it very clear. Uncle Sam is the pusher man. And that this is just a latest attack on the Bolivarian revolution started by Hugo Chavez and continued by Maduro. And Maduro made a statement on June 13th saying no to the new Nazi Zionism. He also expressed Venezuela's support for the Palestinian people, the people of Yemen, the people of Syria, and the people of Iran. And it was in the wake of this anti-colonial speech that Trump raised the bounty to $50 million. So, like the chairman says, the colonizer cannot stand up to us politically and ideologically. They must use the colonial state to try and encircle us, to repress us. And, this clearly, Nicolas Maduro is not a puppet for the U.S. government. Because he would not, be coming under such attack, and there would not be a bounty under his head, if otherwise. So, Comrade Mariah, can you also tell us about some more on the latest in Venezuela?
Yeah, absolutely. Just looking at that, we talked about earlier that the ICE raids, that's not over. Just because you don't see legacy media talking about it, don't mean that, people aren't still going through this, y'all. And other news concerning Latin America, we see that neo-colonialism is just, for that matter, the U.S. has deployed over 4,000 Marines and other military armed warships, aircraft, and a nuclear-powered submarine to Latin American and Caribbean waters near Venezuela's coast to prepare for an assault on what the U.S. is absurdly calling these drug cartels. And Venezuela adamantly denies these accusations of drugs because Venezuela has no permitted drugs or drug labs. So Venezuela's army showed readiness earlier this week, and its Navy had been deployed as soon as the U.S. Imperial Navy entered Caribbean waters, y'all. So on August 11th, thousands of Venezuelans, included community leaders and youth, poured into the streets in the great anti-imperialist rally for peace. So to protest the narco-terrorism of the Venezuelan far right and to oppose the U.S. intervention and to express their support for Maduro in the wake of Pam Bondi putting forth that $50 million reward for his arrest that we talked about earlier. And just for this false charge of narco-terrorism, which the Venezuelan far right is actually engaged in, y'all. So Maduro defeated U.S. CIA Zionists Juan Guaido and Edmundo Gonzalez and shows that the U.S. must use military force. In this instance, they don't have any other option. And that force is when that comes in and cannot tolerate just genuine elections, and in their attempt to undermine the Bolivarian revolution. So the Venezuelan people are steadfast, and they're determined, y'all, determined to defend themselves and their oil and their sovereignty. So just as all colonized people are rising up and fighting back, we're seeing it happening everywhere against this colonizer, the colonizer that is everywhere, that colonial state, despite their best efforts, is to prevent us from doing so, y'all. So that's a wrap when it comes to Whirlwind Weekly updates this week. And speaking of Whirlwind, it's time to get into our primary objective about Marcus Garvey.
Woo, yeah, man, we threw it down, I think, for this Whirlwind Weekly recap. It's a lot going on, and we'll talk about an event later. It says, don't agonize, organize, and we'll say a little bit more about that. But yes, Comrade Mariah, when we're talking about the whirlwind, we're referencing Garvey's speech, "Look for me in the whirlwind or the storm," to assert the continuum of the African liberation struggle, and he was correct to do so. Marcus Garvey, who was born August 17, 1887 in St. Anne's Bay, Jamaica, and in the early 20th century led a massive organization, the Universal Negro Improvement Association, or UNIA, which had a membership of an estimated 11 million Africans from all around the world. This is before cell phones.
Wow.
Or you could just access anybody, quickly. This was real organizing work that had to happen to bring 11 million Africans from around the world. Garvey was not interested in organizing around a philosophy that sought acceptance from the colonizer. Oh, please like us. We want to integrate with you and drink from your water fountains and use your toilets. And we just want you to know we're not bad people. That was not Garvey's mission. He set out on the mission to unite African people and declared Africa for Africans at home and abroad. He recognized the significance of the economic question as it pertained to political power, and thus moved to establish an independent economic capacity for African people. You said it, Comrade Mariah, those who control the land, have the power. And the same is true. Those who control the economy, they have the power, and the land is attached to economy. So the UNIA had the Negro World newspaper, they had the Black Star steamship line, the Nurses Brigade, and even a uniformed army, the African Legion. Quoting from Philosophy and Opinions of Marcus Garvey, the Universal Negro Improvement Association for 5 years has been proclaiming to the world the readiness of the Negro to carve out a pathway for himself in the course of life. Men of other races and nations have become alarmed at this attitude of the Negro and his desire to do things for himself and by himself. This alarm has become so universal that organizations have been brought into being here, there, and everywhere for the purpose of deterring and obstructing this forward move of our race, Pan-Africanism. Propaganda has been waged here, there, and everywhere for the purpose of misinterpreting the intention of this organization. Some have said that this organization seeks to create discord and discontent among the races. Some say we are organized for the purpose of hating other people. Every sensible, sane, and honest-minded person knows that the Universal Negro Improvement Association has no such intention. And it was the Garvey movement that gave our people the red, black, and green flag that we proudly fly currently in St. Louis, Missouri, and St. Petersburg, Florida. And here is actually Chairman Amalia Shatella addressing in an address to the African nation, speaking on the significance of the African nation's flag, the red, black, and green, y'all.
And Marcus Garvey was not just somebody who was there. He represented the largest anti-colonial, anti-imperialist movement in history. There, you can't name another movement that had 11 million people stretched across the globe who saluted the red, black, and green, who came up with the slogan and fought for one Africa, one nation, who fought for Africa for Africans at home and abroad. That was Marcus Garvey. That was a critical development in the struggle, not only of African people, but the struggles of the peoples around the world.
Wow. Well, look, y'all, when we raise up Garvey, just in part because it's often overlooked at the role of the leadership of the African working class in the struggle against this colonial capitalism. When people think of anti-capitalist movements of the early 20th century, they bring up the Soviet Union and Lenin, not recognizing the profound role and influence that Garvey was playing during this period. And just as Comrade mentioned earlier, this was a period without the internet. This was a period to where Hey, we had to get out there on foot. We had to organize, and we had to come together. We had to come together person to person, something different. And you saw it, 11 million people, y'all. So here's Chairman Omali, used to tell her the leader of the African nation in the International African Revolution of our 21st century Garvey night on the significance of the Garvey movement as the largest anti-colonial movement in history.
Movement that has defined itself as 21st century Garveyites. And we have done this not just in the contest with the United States, but in the contest with all the other forces who pretend to love freedom and who pretend to love the idea of Black people being free. Even like the New York Times belatedly comes up with this statement about what Garvey represented in the real world. The fact is that the African People's Socialist Party and the Uhuru movement have been fighting for Marcus Garvey, fighting and became Garveyites. In fact, it was Garvey who gave us the red, black, and green flag that's so ubiquitous even today, more than 100 years later. You see African people with the red, black, and green. And we established here at the Uhuru House, where I'm standing now in St. Louis, 50-foot flagpole. In the middle of economic development work we were doing, just like Garvey was doing economic development work that was neutralizing, that was negating the power and the influence of colonial domination. We put a flagpole, a 50-foot flagpole with a 15 by 25-foot red, black, and green there that Black people stopped their cars and busloads of school children stopped and they would take pictures because the Garvey lives in the red, black, and green.
Wow.
Wow.
Yes. Well, we've since met Garvey in the Whirlwind a year after Garvey's death, because Chairman Omali Yeshitela was born October 9th, 1941. Chairman Omali began organizing in the U.S. South. He was in and out of prison as a result of the counterinsurgency war being made on the Black liberation movement in the 1950s and 60s. He faced assassination attempts in the 1970s and 80s after surviving the height of the attacks on the Black Revolution. He formed the African People's Socialist Party in 1972 with the mission to complete our defeated revolution, which includes uniting the entire dispersed African nation. And Chairman Omali developed the revolutionary scientific theory of African internationalism. We talked about this in our program earlier today. The advancement of Garvey's philosophy of African fundamentalism, despite attempts to rewrite Garvey as a Pan-Africanist. That was actually Du Bois, W.B. Du Bois thing. And W.B. Du Bois, the African petty bourgeoisie, worked alongside, the colonial government and, as Chairman says, cut his teeth and to try to destroy the Garvey movement. And since then, he has been incorrectly defined as a Pan-Africanist when really he was putting forth African fundamentalism, and and the party and the chairman advanced that theory and into African internationalism today. The chairman's theory didn't exist to simply explain political or abstract concepts. It's a theory of practice that has been applied in the real world. It's a theory that, as we stated in the beginning of our show, draws out colonialism as the fundamental contradiction plaguing all African and oppressed people globally, not just in the US, not just in Jamaica, not just in, certain pockets of Africa or something like that, but globally. This is the case of African and colonized people. This is, a social system built on our colonial domination. And that is where all the contradictions of the society unfold. And it's a theory that requires our movement to struggle against worldviews that place us in a perpetual state of begging for acceptance from our colonizers. Just like Garvey, under the chairman's leadership, the African People's Socialist Party is organizing the independent African anti-colonial economy as part of our struggle to be free and self-determining. So not waiting on a miracle or, the official day of revolution, but in the process of making a revolution, establishing the independent economy right now. And just like Garvey, Chairman Omali and the African People's Socialist Party came under attack by the US government to crush these efforts. And here's Chairman Omali Yeshitela speaking on this at a community rally hosted by the St. Louis branch of the International People's Democratic Uhuru movement.
In the world, this is the era of Garvey. With 11 million Black people all around the world, part of a single organization. And even as the League of Nations of 1919 was getting together to see who was going to get what parts of Africa and other places, it was Garvey who said, Africa for Africans at home and abroad. Africa for Africans at home in Africa and abroad in St. Louis. That is to say, all the places we were, Africa was ours and not theirs. And so this is a part of the struggle that they were contending with. And so they had to crush the Garvey movement. They had to crush every movement of oppressed peoples everywhere as it rose up, because when people begin to involve ourselves in producing life for ourselves and not for the colonizer, then the whole apparatus shakes to its very foundations, which is one of the reasons they would attack this movement, our party, which is one of the most significant things that happened in the last year. They would attack this party because we were initiating a process of doing for ourselves, feeding, clothing, and housing ourselves, because we have something like more than 50 different economic development projects that we control, not that they control. Because we were the ones who were creating marketplaces to feed and clothe and house ourselves. This was doing it for ourselves as opposed to doing it for them. And this became a part of the process that we're talking about. So,
wow. And if you're watching online, you can see, as the chairman said, doing it for ourselves, not doing it for them. So you could see some of this work and some of the institutions that's going on there in St. Louis under that Black Power Blueprint and African People's Education and Defense Fund. So when discussing this importance of the work in persons who are working to carry out Garvey's vision, y'all, we must raise up Azania Shatella, the deputy chair for the African People's Socialist Party, coordinator of the party's economic front. She is laying the foundation, y'all, for the independent anti-colonial African economy that the colonial state attacked on July 29th, 2022. So the leadership of African women reflected in the Garvey movement is maintained by the Uhuru movement still. And Deputy Chair Azania is a shining example of this, y'all. So this massive objective of establishing a dual and contending power institutions that places power back in the hands of the African working class globally is a major task, y'all. And she does it with so much creativity, so much brilliance, and so much precision. So we should just mention that the deputy chair also shares her birthday with none other than who? Chairman Amalia Shatella. And you are talk about a meeting Garvey in the whirlwind, y'all. So, wow.
Yes. Oh, I know in our movement, we don't necessarily believe in coincidences, but whoa, that's pretty major. Meeting Garvey in the whirlwind and reflected in Chairman Amalia Shatella and the deputy chair, Azania Shatella. Wow, this is, like I said, just a really incredible discussion. And like we've said up to now, it's not just something that we want to, hold Garvey up because he was this really important leader and figure, African patriot, and he was all those things. But we have a responsibility to live like Garvey, to work like Garvey, and to carry out and to complete the mission. And we can do that because we have the vehicle like the African People's Socialist Party. So as we conclude our primary objective around completing the vision of Marcus Garvey, I want to share this poem, this flag of mine, that was written by Jacques Garvey. And it's something that we recite, during our community rallies on Sundays. You saw one of those rallies right there in St. Louis, Missouri. And if you're ever in town, or if you're, right there, you're watching right now and you're located in St. Louis, Missouri, or in the surrounding areas, there are rallies every Sunday at 3 p.m. Central Time at 4101 West Florissant Avenue at the Uhuru House. So we read this poem, this flag of mine, again by Jacques Garvey, and it goes, regardless of what is told of it, here's to this flag of mine. The red, black, and green, hopes in its future bright, Africa has seen. Here's to the red of it, great nations shall know of it, in time to come. Red blood shall flow of it, historians shall write of it, great flag of mine. Here's to the black of it, 2 billions back of it, whose destiny depends on it, the red, black, and green of it, O flag of mine. Here's to the green of it, young men shall dream of it, face shot and shells of it, waving so high. Here's to the whole of it, colors, groton pole of it, pleased is my soul of it, regardless of what is told of it. Thanks God for giving it, great flag of mine. So, Uhuru, again, that was this flag of mine by Comrade Jacques Garvey. Okay. So that will take us into our For the Culture, and very excited to welcome on our special guest and looking for her now to join, but we will be having on Kendra Bulluck-Major. She is the executive director of the upcoming Orange Blossom Classic in Miami Gardens, Florida. Kendrick is a serial entrepreneur and business professional with over 18 years of experience in business development, acquisition, and management. In 2018, Kendra furthered her mission of helping youth by obtaining the rights to the once prominent and highly attended Orange Blossom Classic. So we are so happy that she'll be joining us. And let me just check the status, see, because I saw her in our waiting room, and just want to make sure that she's not having any connection issues. But for those who don't know, also around the Orange Blossom Classic, and a little bit more about Kendra herself. So I mentioned that she is the executive director of the Orange Blossom Classic, also serial entrepreneur. And she's also a mother of 2 boys in active sports. In 2018, Kendra furthered her mission of helping youth by obtaining the rights to the once prominent and highly attended Orange Blossom Classic. She is one of the 2 women who in the country to wholly own the rights to a football sporting event property. The original Orange Blossom Classic was a nationally recognized collegiate football game played annually in South Florida. The Orange Blossom Classic became known as the Black National Championship during an era when Africans in sports struggled to break into playing and coaching in predominantly white institutions. And I think we have Kendra on now, so let's see. Oh, okay, she is coming on. And Sister Kendra, can you hear us?
Not quite yet.
Oh. I'm just gonna chat her right quick.
Yeah, and just how you mentioned 18 years of experience when it comes to that. This is something so dynamic when it comes to this work. 2 sisters here, 2 sisters, the only sisters that own this. Is that's amazing here. And yeah, we're trying to get Sister Kendra on the line with us. So yeah, with us here.
Hi, I'm here.
Oh, okay. It's here. We can hear
Yes,
you.
welcome on, and thank you for joining us, Kendra, as we celebrate the legacies and important leaders like Marcus Garvey.
We just saw your camera. We just saw you flash on.
There you go.
Here I
Hi. Yes, I want to welcome you, and thank you for joining us, Kendra.
Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, today we're celebrating that legacy, as I mentioned, of Marcus Garvey, and just important leadership, and just continuing that here as we do with the African People's Socialist Party, and just advocate for that ability of the Black community to do for ourselves, y'all. And just, I'm so excited to have this discussion with you, and we're just so happy to have you here. And just for starters, Kendra, can you let our listeners and our viewers know what the Orange Blossom Classic is?
Yes, absolutely. So the Orange Blossom Classic is an annual HBCU football game that's played every year down here in beautiful South Florida. And it is an opportunity for us to celebrate ourselves. It is a celebration of HBCU pride, HBCU culture. We have this year 2 amazing teams. The matchup includes Florida A&M University out of Tallahassee, Florida, and of course Howard University out of Washington, D.C. And of course, that is just special for so many reasons. I always say there's never a shortage of prominent alumni that come through the walls of those institutions. So to have them here, of course, FAMU is a staple in this event, just because, of course, the original classic, very rich in history, the original classic began in 1933. And that first classic was actually played between Howard and FAMU. So this is a celebration of the inaugural game, but the game itself, like most classics, was established during a time of segregation when, unfortunately, we could not be at predominantly white institutions. And so the classic was actually the brainchild of a former athletic director at Florida A&M University who said, well, if we can't, we're going to celebrate ourselves. And so it kind of became that de facto national championship. And it was FAMU against another top HBCU, and whoever the winner of that game was, they were the Black National football champion. And it was a time where when it started off in Jacksonville in a blacks only ballpark. And then it moved to Tampa. And from Tampa, it moved to Miami, Florida, which is where I am. And once it made its home there, it progressed to crowds sometimes as high as 60,000 people. It eventually, unfortunately, went away in 1978. And of course, by that time, that was due to integration. And that was one of those situations where, of course, by that time, our talent had really started to be recognized and very well known. So a lot of our student athletes were kind of, poached, and they were, of course, and they ended up attending predominantly white institutions. So unfortunately, the talent from our HBCUs began to slowly go away. And so fast forward 42 years later, we were fortunate enough to bring the classic back here to Miami. And the purpose was to celebrate that history. It was to remind, our current students and current student athletes just what it means to be a part of historically Black colleges and universities, to understand why these institutions exist, and to give people options. I am not opposed to attending any university, whether it be an HBCU or a predominantly white institution, but I do think that I am opposed to not being informed. So I think that it is extremely important that when you are making your decisions about where you want to go to school, I think it's important to have all options. And one of the things down here, we did not have HBCU football. Florida Memorial University, which is one of our historically Black universities at the time, did not have a football program. And so a lot of our student athletes did not see an HBCU football classic in their backyard. So the purpose of reviving this game was so that we could celebrate the history and allow them to see that HBCU culture.
Wow, that is really profound. I really appreciate you breaking that down in that history. And just the recognition of how it happens in a lot of the different fields too, not just athletics, but just the talent and the genius of our community like being drained to for somebody else's benefit. And so to see this as also trying to reconcentrate that talent back into our community is really, really important. So really appreciate you. And this sounds very exciting, and you kind of just spoke to it a little bit, but just wanted to if we can expound more on the history of this institution and how you see the significance of the historically Black colleges and universities in relation to Black people's fight for freedom and self-determination. It's this ongoing struggle that we are engaged in to be able to do for self. And so just wanted your thoughts about this in relationship to this program.
Well, we know that HBCUs, and, we say all the time, I just was writing something out today. And one of the things that I said was that I want our students to know that you can matriculate through the walls of these institutions. And from there, you can go anywhere. You can choose your path, your field of study, your field of work. You're not limited because you went to an HBCU. So I think that's the first message that's important that we get out there. And what that does, it empowers you. When you're on the campus of an HBCU and you see people who look like you, then you feel as though you can do the things that they're doing. And what classics do, not just the Orange Blossom Classic, but a lot of classics, when you bring individuals, just what was so significant about the Orange Blossom Classic, think about it, in the late 1930s all the way up to the 1970s, these were college educated individuals. These were doctors and attorneys and politicians back in the late 50s, mid 60s that were very well educated. So now when you're seeing that, you say, yes, I can do the same thing. So that representation, I think, is everything. And that is what empowers people. You become what you see, and you believe what you see. So I think that is first and foremost why classics, because this is a gathering of all of just it's a gathering of Black excellence. And that is really why I believe it's a football game, but it's so much more than a football game.
Oh, wow.
in
Yeah.
that regard. Yeah.
Yeah. That's so powerful how you said that, just that representation, being able to see yourself and seeing where you could be. So yeah, that is so powerful there, Kendra. Now, you did mention and you touched there when it comes to the classics, and out in New Orleans, I know that every year we're waiting for the Bayou Classic. That's Grambling and Southern, and over in Mississippi, there's the Capital City Classic, and that's at Jackson State Alcorn. And now, here we are with the Orange Blossom Classic. And you mentioned it a little. Can you tell our viewers and our listeners here on, just speak a little bit to how important when it comes to the Black culture, the culture itself, is it when it comes to these classics?
Oh, it's important. I mean, it is like this. What I say is a classic is one event where there is sports, there's entertainment, there is politics and social justice all wrapped into one. So you get the football side of it, you get the entertainment side of it, you get, for us, we've been fortunate to have individuals, a lot of people, kind of organizations actually have their conferences here, right? So we never have a shortage of affluent individuals. So I think yearly we've had the National Black Caucus of State Legislators that have hosted their conference here. We've had the Florida Black Caucus of State Legislators. We've had the National Professional Black Lobbyist Association. We have had, last year, Benjamin Crump, graced our stage. He'll be back with us. He's actually been with us like every year, but he'll be back with us again this year. We've had, just so many people that have come through here that represent the culture. And so from being excited about the bands and the pageantry and the football and seeing the Black campus queens and kings, to sitting down and having meaningful discussions about voters registration and and inequities in voting, and how do we empower our people and get them to the polls. Like, there is everything that you could possibly think of rolled into one, just from an educational standpoint, all the way to, again, the pageantry and the excitement. So, I'd say if you owe anybody money, don't go to a classic, because you're guaranteed to bump into one, number one. But bigger than that, you're going to be educated on Black excellence. You're going to be educated. We have registered people to vote. There's just so much that is done, and it's done all with the backdrop of having fun at a classic and celebrating Black culture. Yeah.
Well,
you go from listening to 2 Chainz at 2:00, and then 4:00, you're sitting in a conference, talking about voter suppression. Like, where did you get that from?
Yeah, multifaceted. We love it.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, not only does it sound like a good time, I know that it's also beautiful. Like, when you just go, like, it just gets stunned.
Yes.
Well, I really, really appreciate you sharing this information with our listeners and our viewers. And if people want more information about the Orange Blossom Classic, where can they find it?
On our website or our social media pages. So our website is orangeblossomclassic.com. And then all of our social media pages are at Orange Blossom FC. And this year we have an array of events that you can find on the website. And we have some amazing performances taking place. So, and just to throw this out there really quickly, because we are on the campus of Howard, because we have Howard University, we're celebrating our D9 organizations. So every D9 president will be with us. And again, that's a celebration of their civic work that they've done throughout the community. So to all of my D9 orgs, go onto our website, get your tickets, and come out and celebrate with your national presidents as we recognize them for the work that they've done in the community.
Right on. Right on. Well, thank you so much again for joining us, Kendra. Again, she is the executive director for the Orange Blossom Classic. I don't know if you were able to hear, we read your bio and we were like, woo! So yes, and of course we're rooting for a dynamic classic this year.
Yes.
And as you mentioned, and also appreciate this event and support for our radio station, Black Power 96 Radio. And like I'm gonna put this back on screen again, just so y'all see. Saturday, August 30th, 2025, at the Hard Rock Stadium in Miami Gardens, and that's orangeblossomclassic.com. So thank you so much. And just any final words for us, Kendra, before we go ahead and proceed with our show?
No, listen, just thank you guys for having me, and I look forward to seeing everybody in Miami Labor Day weekend.
Yeah, that's what I said. Thank you, Kendra. Thank you.
All right.
So much.
Thank you.
Uhuru. So right now, well, first of all, this has been a very powerful episode. Once again, One Africa Worldview, bringing it to you, and it's just really dynamic in all the different ways that this just flows into each other. When we came to the headlines, and what I think what it's doing is really exposing how, the chairman talks about this being a global colonial mode of production. There's this, worldwide, relationship to everything, and it's not this isolated thing. But when we look at these headlines, we look at these world events, and we look at the work that Marcus Garvey and now the African People's Socialist Party has taken up, and even these cultural activities inside the that we just talked about just happening inside the U.S. We see just this overall relationship of everything happening in the world to the same process. And what you have is a process where the colonized, the oppressed, the exploited of the world are fighting to create a new world where that domination, where that oppression, exploitation doesn't exist. And then you have these social forces that have benefited from the centuries-long oppression, exploitation, colonial domination of our people, fighting for the old world. And so that's what we're seeing, like this tug of war for a whole different process. But we have a reason to be optimistic on the side of humanity, on the side of this new world, because we are winning. So that will, we're bringing this episode to a close. But of course, first, before we do that, let's hear about some upcoming events with Comrade Mariah.
Yeah. Well, yes, it's so important that we're honoring our African patrons like Marcus Garvey, that we also do the work like Garvey. So if you're interested in getting connected in any kind of way, and you heard the chairman say we have to do it for ourselves and not for them, for ourselves, y'all. And with the Uhuru movement, by the way of joining, supporting, or volunteering, here are some of the events you can tap into here that's coming up. So if you're over in the Philly area on Saturday, August 23rd, you can join the northern region of the African People's Socialist Party at the One Africa, One Nation Uhuru Flea Market at the historic Clark Park in West Philadelphia between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. You can shop among a variety of African vendors selling natural hair and skin products, African jewelry and clothing, books, vinyl records, and more, y'all. And you can visit oneafricamarketphilly.org for more info. That's oneafricamarketphilly.org for more info there. And just one time zone away in St. Louis, Missouri, the One Africa, One Nation Farmers Market will also be taking place on the same day, Saturday, August 23rd at O'Fallon Park at 4343 West Florissant Avenue from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. That's 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. at 4343 West Florissant Avenue. The One Africa, One Nation Farmers Market is more than a market, y'all. It's a hub for Black-owned businesses, grassroots organizing, and African culture. And finally, if you're in the New Orleans, Louisiana area, the Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace and Reparations is hosting its 17th annual conference on August 23rd through 24th at the Dillard University for Racial Justice, located at 2601 Gentilly Boulevard in PSB 115 or George's Auditorium. The theme for the conference is Don't Agonize, Organize. And you can register over at blackisbackcoalition.org. That's blackisbackcoalition.org. So for more events and everything else going on, you can always visit theburningspear.com/events. And of course, we'll be keeping you all updated right here on any of the socials. So make sure you're following us there, y'all.
Woo! Well, that is it for today's show. And we, of course, want to thank you all for tuning in. A reminder that starting next week, our shows move to Mondays at 3 p.m. Eastern time. That's 3 p.m. Eastern time. So we're on the same day, but at 3 p.m. Eastern time. So don't forget. And if you subscribe to our channel, you can get notifications for when we go live or when we are live, when we schedule live, so that you don't miss any episode of One Africa Worldview. We also stream on the Burning Spear TV YouTube, Burning Spear Media Rumble, and now on Black Power 96.3 FM radio, hosted in St. Petersburg, Florida, and streaming globally on the Black Power 96 FM radio app.
Worldwide, y'all. Worldwide.
Download that app and you can listen to us no matter where you are. So that's our episode for today. We will see you all next week.
Yeah.
One Africa.
One Africa. One nation.
One nation. Uhuru.